Soulrend of the Spiral Power Charge Unleash Assassin is going as well as I would want it to go. I'm very happy with its performance so far. All I really wanted it to do was just blast some 16.5 maps, and we've pushed it much farther than that. The idea is we're building around the Primal Owl, which allows our Unleash spells to deal more damage for each time their effects reoccur, which ends up being around 20% more damage currently with my current setup, like 25% more damage actually. And then skills supported by Unleash have a +3 to maximum number of seals, so we can get all the way to 9 unseal stacks, meaning that every time we press the button, we get 10 casts of our Soulrend of the Spiral. And then, of course, we have 11 projectiles currently with Soulrend of the Spiral, which leads to about 110 cats every single time we press the button, which is absolutely amazing. And you just see cats go all across the screen. It's really entertaining. And we achieve this through a bunch of different ways, but we use an Awakened GMP and a Bound by Destiny to get to that projectile count that we really need to. Now, Soulrend of the Spiral is a very interesting skill. You don't have to actually run this for this build. I am simply running it because I enjoy Soulrend of the Spiral. It's actually one of my favorite skills in the game right now. But you could slot this in with any other skill possible. I'm just choosing this one. Now, the way it works is it shoots 5 projectiles in a clockwise rotation, and then those projectiles pierce all enemies, and then it applies the damage over time. We're actually ignoring this, and we're focusing more on the projectile portion. The reason why being is the way that it works, you'll shoot one projectile in front of you, and then it'll shoot them clockwise. And then if you add one extra projectile, so if you go from 5 to 6, Soulrend of the Spiral will hit twice on a singular enemy. And then if you go clockwise again and you get to 6 added projectiles, you will hit another time. Meaning that as long as you have an extra 6 projectiles for the skill, which is very easily done thanks to items like Awakened GMP and Bound by Destiny, this allows us to get 3 hits out of Soulrend of the Spiral, which ends up being not only a lot of single target damage, but a lot of clear as well, because remember, it's a bunch of casts of Soulrend the Spiral with a lot of projectiles. Then we utilize stuff like Shrapnel Specialist. I was going to put on a Nimbus, but then Nimbus actually shot up in price significantly to the point where it just wasn't worth running anymore, especially since I could just invest the rest of my currency into the rest of my character and not run the Nimbus and just have more damage overall. And thanks to Shrapnel Specialist, we've gotten very close to that with the 50% chance to return, and they're fired in random directions. It's kind of funny because we're actually not running it for the return. The return is nice and it's useful, but we're actually utilizing it for the projectiles are fired in random directions, because normally it shoots out in like a clockwise rotation, but we actually want it to be random because it ends up making our clear significantly better, which is kind of the whole point of us playing this currently, is to make the clear better. Now, we are doing a big power charge stacking theme. The big reason why we're power charge stacking is so that we can save a lot of our tree, so we can focus more on getting cluster jewels that have the unleash frequency on it. So we're power charge stacking with Assassin, with Void batteries as well, a lot of percent damage. We're using stuff like Badge of the Brotherhood to give us frenzy charges based on our power charges. We're using Inner Conviction so that we get more damage per power charge, but we can't gain frenzy charges. But it means that we can utilize stuff like Raukesh's Impatience, where we have our maximum number of frenzy charges at all times, which means that we're getting the benefit of frenzy charges and power charges at the same time, and Inner Conviction, which is just a lot of extra damage considering right now we're at 10 power charge stacks. And then we're just random stuff like Circle of Nostalgia. We don't really care about the stats on the item. We just care that it's 1 additional power charge. Now, you can eventually get the Corrupt of +1 power charge on your helmet, but that's very expensive. Another part of the build is we're unleash stacking. So we are grabbing all of the additional unleashes, which total to around 9 extra unleash stacks. That means every single time we cast, whenever we're at max unleash stacks, we cast another 9 times. And Primal Owl is also making all of those unleash casts do more damage, and all of that combined means that we can simply tap the button every so often, and we don't have to actually focus and sit there and cast spamming like other spell skills have to do. So that feels great. But what's also nice is we're running a double 5-link setup. So we actually have 2 5-links of Soulrend to the Spiral, meaning that we can alternate between them. So it's just pretty much think of the extra Soulrend of the Spiral gem as like 100% more damage, and you're very close to how much it's actually giving us. And it's also making our clear a lot better, as it's helping our uptime be a lot higher. And then that makes it so we don't need as much unleash stack frequency from our cluster jewels. Right now I have 4 things of Seal Mender, 3 through Cluster Jewels, and 1 through a Megalomaniac, meaning that our Unleash stacks actually go back to max stacks pretty quickly, which is wonderful for us. I also have a helmet with Unleash +1 number of seals on it. I did have to craft it with Redeemer, Hunter, and Influence. The reason being is we need 6 Hunter items for Bound by Destiny, and we only get Unleash from Redeemer, so we had to awaken our orbit, and then we did have to craft it with alterations, and then we went from there. And there's a lot of stuff you can do with the helmet. You can make it a lot better, like get +1 power charge. There's just so many different things you could do with it, but I'm just gonna leave it here for now. Another big part of the reason why we're power charge stacking is for movement speed. Since we're getting a bunch of free frenzy charges all the time that have 100% uptime, we can end up with a lot of movement speed. Right now, I'm sitting around like 160 to 180% movement speed whenever we're mapping, which means we just zoom across the map. Thanks to stuff like Elusive from Assassin, we get movement speed from our chest as well. In theory, if you wanted a lot more defenses, you could go without the Restless Ward, but I wanted movement speed. That's the whole point of this. Then as well, you get movement speed per power frenzy charge. Frenzy charges give movement speed, and then we also get Elusive effect per power charge, which is giving us even more movement speed thanks to Badge of the Brotherhood. Overall, just trying to get as much movement speed as possible so that we can just zoom across the map while also just tapping buttons, which feels really good in practice. Part of the crafting process requires us to run a pair of Elder Hunter Void batteries. How do we make this? Well, the idea is we take 2 wands, one that is Elder Influence, one is Hunter. One of them needs to be a Prophecy wand, and then we awaken or orb them together, and then we end up with Elder Elder Hunter Prophecy Wands. Then we use the Omen of Fortune alongside a Chance Orb to turn it into a Void Battery. The only other Prophecy Wand is an I think a Maven drop, which means that we only ever get Void Batteries from this, which means we can get the 6 required Hunter items for the +1 projectile from the Bound by Destiny, which is very convenient. And then, of course, one of them we either corrupt or we go with the Harvest enchant for extra crit chance on the item, which then means our base crit based on our weapon mod on our Assassin Ascendancy node allows us to just try to get as much base crit as possible from there. And that's pretty much it for crafting in that regard. I did try to craft my own Unleash clusters with like the mod Seal Mender. Seal Mender is a very important node for this build, but the problem is crafting it onto jewels, like cluster jewels, is rather annoying. So I just bought mine. Now, of course, to craft your own, you'd probably have to just roll for it and then fracturing orb the Seal Mender and then craft from there to get useful ones. But if it comes down to that, you could also maybe just buy Megalomaniacs with Seal Mender on it. That works too. Right now, currently, I'm at 4 Seal Menders, but you could get away with 3 of them, but I'm happy with the current 4 Seal Menders. Now, how do I feel about the build overall now that I've played it and invested into it? I think that it's not necessarily worth it to go Soulrend to the Spiral. It's a fun skill, and it's fun to cheat the mana cost with Unleash, but it's rather expensive to get the projectiles needed to make the skill work while being an assassin, as Bound by Destiny is absurdly restrictive when you need to run 6 influence items, because as you well know, influence items aren't necessarily that good in the cheap budget territory, right? They're only good once you start really crafting with them. My survivability wasn't really there until I managed to invest significantly more currency into the build, and that means like getting a Jade and a armor flask, dumping the Dying Sun after we got the Bound by Destiny so that we could actually have the projectiles. Getting life gain on hit Watcher's Eye was a help too. That helped out a lot. Not relying on Leech allowed us to do the less recovery maps a lot easier. Overall, the survivability could be a little bit better. It is now functional and completely fine and easy to do in T16.5 and T17 maps. The problem is once you take that to Ubers, like you're not gonna survive that well. It was very difficult to attempt to cap my spell suppression, mainly because we just have so many uniques in the build. So like it's hard to get our spell suppression properly without investing significantly more currency into the character. And that's like one of the main ways to improve our tankiness is to get more spell suppression. The avoidance of elusive though felt really good while mapping. I will say it helped out a lot. Like it just made it so that I never felt like as though I was gonna die like instantly, which is nice. That's really good for assassin, as assassins' defenses aren't as good as they could be. But overall, I enjoyed the build. Would I recommend it to anybody? No. But what I will recommend is trying something Unleash related with the Oshabi Keystone, and maybe power charge stacking with it as well. Just simply put, maybe not on an assassin. Maybe there are just better classes to do this on, but I enjoyed my time with it, and there are just probably better ways of going about this. But with all that being said, let's go do something else. Bye.